Have you ever had one of those moments where your life suddenly collides with someone else's in the most unlikely place imaginable? For me, it happened 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, inside a pressurized metal tube hurtling through the night. I walked onto that flight just a regular teenager and stepped off a completely different person. It all started because I couldn't stop staring at a woman in first class who looked like she was about to die, and no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed but just didn't know what to do. I was 17. My name's Elijah Williams. And I was sitting in coach, 3 rows behind a woman gasping for air, her lips turning blue. Her name was Catherine Harrington. Her husband, this silver-haired man in a designer suit worth more than my grandma's rent, was shouting for help, yelling at the crew, asking if there was a doctor on board. There wasn't, not that I could hear. The flight attendants looked terrified, fumbling through the emergency kit, and all the while, Richard Harrington held his wife's hand so tightly I thought he might break it. I just sat there, shrinking into my hoodie, praying someone else would stand up and save her. But when they finally came running through economy, scanning for someone, anyone, who looked like a doctor, their eyes slid right past me. I get it. Who expects a skinny black kid in ripped jeans to save the day? But I'd seen this before. My grandma, her heart, her lungs. All those nights researching symptoms, learning about blood clots, studying what to do when breathing becomes a fight. And Catherine? Well, she was pregnant, which made it even more urgent. I hesitated. I really did. What if I was wrong? What if they laughed me off the plane? But the sound of her gasping, it was the same sound my grandma made that night we rushed her to the ER. That's when I stood up. It might be a pulmonary embolism, I said, loud enough to stop the flight attendant mid-step. Pregnancy increases the risk. If you have aspirin, give her one. Get her oxygen, elevate her legs. Please, let me help. They didn't trust me at first. The businessman looked at me like I was a stray dog sniffing around his Porsche. But desperation makes people reconsider. So they let me through. And suddenly I was kneeling in first class, surrounded by strangers who couldn't decide if I was a fraud or a miracle worker. I talked Catherine through each breath, checked her leg for swelling, explained what I suspected was happening while her husband grilled me with rapid-fire questions, barely holding it together. And when Catherine whispered, "My left leg's been swollen since yesterday," I knew. We kept her calm, gave her aspirin, and got oxygen flowing. The pilot rerouted for an emergency landing in Iceland. For the next hour, I stayed with her, just like I had with Grandma all those nights. I kept her awake, kept her breathing, kept my hand near her wrist to feel the baby's heartbeat flutter through the portable monitor. When we landed, medics took her straight to the hospital. Later, a doctor told us the aspirin probably saved both her and the baby. Richard tried to thank me, but I cut him off. Don't thank me yet. He still needs real care. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, was that I'd missed the biggest chance of my life that night. I was supposed to be in London for an interview with the Young Medical Achievers program. It was a once-in-a-lifetime shot, something that could have changed everything for me and Grandma. But instead, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room. I called Grandma from there. I didn't mention the missed scholarship. I just told her I'd helped someone. She said, "You did right, baby. Knowledge is a gift. You're meant to share." Richard found me a little while later looking awkward beneath the hospital's fluorescent lights. He wanted to repay me, offered scholarship money, connections, anything I wanted. But when he asked what I needed, I didn't ask for a backdoor into the program or a check with a lot of zeros. I told him about Harlem, about Grandma, about the clinic near our place where people waited hours to be seen, where families had to choose between groceries and insulin. I told him if he really wanted to help, then help them, not just me. And to my surprise, he listened. Really listened. Maybe because his wife and unborn child were alive, because a Harlem kid knew what to do when no one else did. The next morning, Richard met me at the hotel cafe. I thought he'd try to buy me off again, but he didn't. He said he wanted to invest in me, get me through med school, whatever it took. When I hesitated, he leaned in and said, "This isn't charity. This is because you earned it." I thanked him, but told him again, "It's not about me. If you really want to make a difference, build something real. Fund a clinic that actually helps people like my grandma." You should have seen his face. It was like nobody had ever told him that money wasn't the answer. For a second, he looked completely lost, then kind of relieved, like someone had finally given him purpose. Back at the hospital, Catherine and Richard asked if I'd partner with them to design a health initiative for Harlem. They didn't just want to use my story. They wanted my vision, full scholarship, full care for Grandma, and a real role for me in the project. Catherine looked me in the eyes and said, "We want this to be something that works, not just something that feels good." I was overwhelmed. Honestly, part of me wondered if any of it was real, but Grandma always said, "God puts people in your path for a reason." So I agreed, but with one condition. Local leaders had to be involved from the start, and they couldn't walk away when it stopped making headlines. They agreed. A few weeks later, the Harringtons came to Harlem to meet Grandma. That's when everything shifted. See, my grandma's the kind of woman who can see through anything. She grilled Richard over cornbread and sweet potato pie, made him promise to stick around, to actually listen. She said, "Most rich folks talk about charity. I want action, not promises," Richard promised. And for the first time, I believed him. That night, we mapped out the beginning of the Harlem Community Health Initiative: transportation for the elderly, access to affordable meds, specialists who wouldn't turn away Medicaid patients, and a long-term commitment to a neighborhood that deserved more than survival. And just like that, my story became something bigger than me. Whenever Richard started to forget why he was doing all this, Grandma was there to remind him. We walked the neighborhood together, block by block, not just talking about what was broken, but showing him the long wait times, the underfunded clinics, the people who fell through the cracks. And with every street corner, every conversation, I watched his eyes open a little wider. He began to understand. This wasn't about tossing money at a problem from a distance. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, their dignity, their struggle, their worth. Months later, we opened the clinic. My name was on the advisory board. Grandma got the care she needed, her own specialist, new equipment, and for the first time in a long while, a real shot at more good years. Catherine gave birth to a baby girl, Beatrice Elizabeth Harrington, named after my grandma and Richard's mother. And get this, they asked me to be her godfather, me, a kid from Harlem who stood up on a plane and spoke when no one else did. Richard changed too. He stopped seeing charity as a checkbox or a tax write-off and started seeing it as a responsibility. That day in the hospital, he told me, "You made me see things I didn't want to see." I told him, "Ignorance isn't permanent. You just have to choose to learn." And he did. That's the thing about real change. It doesn't come from grand gestures or putting your name on a building. It comes from truly recognizing the people in front of you, not who you assume they are, but who they are. From understanding that sometimes your future is tied up in someone else's, in ways you could never predict. Maybe in a pressurized cabin, 35,000 feet above the ocean, maybe in a hospital waiting room, maybe over sweet potato pie in a Harlem kitchen. I never asked for fame or fortune. I asked for dignity, for people like my grandma to be seen, to matter. So tell me, what do you think justice really means? Is it just getting what you deserve? Or is it making sure everyone has a fair shot, no matter where they start? I'm still figuring that out. But if you ever find yourself in a moment where you could change someone's life, do it. Speak up. Stand up. You never know who's listening or what kind of world you might be helping to build.